say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, everyone. My name is J.R. Romano. I'm the state party chairman. And first of all, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight and supporting the party. And I know in traffic and in lines, we really appreciate it. Tonight's going to be a great night. So let me introduce you to our moderators. We have Ken Dixon from Hearst Media and Professor Gary Rose from Sacred Heart University. And our traffic cop for tonight is State Representative Tom O'Day. Tom?
Thank you very much, JR. This night's all about the candidates, so without too much further ado, I want to get to introducing them. But first, I would like to have a moment of silence for Barbara Bush, one of the finest first ladies we've ever had. So please, everybody could join me in a moment of silence for Barbara Bush. Thank you very much. Second, Shelton Mayor Mark Lauretti. Third, Danbury Mayor Mark Boughton. Fourth, attorney and small business owner Peter Lumaj. Fifth, Navy veteran, high-tech CEO Steve Obstinik. Sixth, businessman David Stemerman. Seven, former Trumbull First Selectman Tim Herbst. Eight, former U.S. Comptroller General David Walker. And State Representative Dr. Prasad Srinivasan, my colleague, I'm a state rep for Canaan in the 125th district. I missed the last two votes to get here on time. Please don't hold it against Dr. Srinivasan. He did not leave early. He voted on the last two bills, so he could be here to lead. So he'll be here. All right, State Representative Dr. Prasad Srinivasan. So, and just to reintroduce, Ken Dixon is the political editor of the Hearst, Connecticut papers, award-winning journalist, Stanford native, and Ohio University soccer star.
Whoa.
Dr. Gary Rose, professor, chair, Department of Government Politics and Global Studies at Sacred Heart University. He's authored several books on Connecticut politics, and he's a media and political commentator. So they'll be asking questions, and again, we're going from left to right. The candidates will raise their panel if they want to talk on a subject, and we'll call them again left to right. And without any further ado, please.
Test. Can you hear me? Before we start, could I ask one question of the audience? How many people are delegates? A few. Everybody else is here to be entertained. Okay. So there's something going on up in Hartford right now that Dr. Srinivasan just escaped from. There's a $220 million deficit in the current budget. Oh, okay.
Yeah, 1 minute opening statements. We're starting with Mike Hanlon.
Tipped off the first question. Forget it.
Just gave me a head start. So, what's happened? It's as if just getting by in our state is a new measure for success. I don't know when we lost sight of things, and when we surrendered to this way of life, but I will tell you, as your next governor, we will wake up in Connecticut, where our commute time from New York to Stamford is 30 minutes, New York to New Haven is 60 minutes, and New York to Hartford is 90 minutes. Because it matters. It's the difference between moms and dads getting home in time before their kids are tucked in bed. We will wake up in Connecticut where our home values actually appreciate versus depreciate. And we will wake up in Connecticut where our young adults can find opportunities right here in our state without having to look elsewhere. In our vibrant cities with good paying jobs and solid quality of life. Because it matters. That is the difference between you and I having to get on a plane to visit our grandkids someday.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you.
That's why I'm running to be governor. Thank you very much.
We got to be sticklers on the time, so please.
My name is Mark Lauretti, and I'm currently the mayor of the city of Shelton. I was elected in 1991, the year that the income tax was put in place. You know, I thought it was a bad idea back then, and I think we can all agree that it was a terrible idea now. So I'm in my 27th year as mayor. I've been elected 14 times. I represent a city that is very different today than it was back in 1991, and so are the people who elected me. You know, the state took one course in 91, and I took a very different one. We got very different results. I run a city that is thriving, that is growing continually for the last 27 years with a grand list that was started out at 1 billion, now it's over 5. With a company base of 400 that is now at 15. And so we're able to maintain taxes. And we are the most affordable city in the state of Connecticut. And the reason for that is because of our tax structure.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Mayor Mark Boughton. I'm from the city of Danbury. I'm honored to be here this evening. Just yesterday, the city of Danbury was ranked with some of the best metrics in the state of Connecticut. In fact, we are rated to have the best economy of any city in the state of Connecticut. And I'm incredibly proud of that ranking. But in this state, right now as we stand here, you can't say you're open for business when every welcome center is closed across the state of Connecticut. You can't say that we want new businesses to come here, to stay here, and for people to not leave here if you've got a tax structure that just completely drives business out of our great state. So I'm going to tell you something. As your next governor, I'm going to eliminate the state income tax over the next 10 years. I'm going to put people back to work in Connecticut, and I'm going to make you proud of this state once again.
Thank you very much for being here. I hope it does. My name is Peter Lumaj. Thank you very much for having me. And we don't want to go Democrat on us tonight, okay? Don't drag anyone out of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I live in Fairfield. I'm your neighbor. My kids go to school around here. I've been here for 9 years, but I just want to remind you that there are other parts of the state, in our state, besides Fairfield County, and I've gotten to know those areas very well. I'm seeking the nomination as a conservative. I'm the only conservative in the race. And what makes me a conservative is my background. About 30 years ago, I came to the United States as a refugee, went through a lot. I had to learn English. After I learned some English, I went to college, investigated white-collar crimes in New York City for a while, went to law school, became an attorney. I'm a small business owner, I'm a family man, and I'm your neighbor. I'm seeking the nomination. I hope I'll get your support. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening. My name is Steve Obstinik. Do you all have enough candidates for governor up here or what? And I'll make it a little simple tonight. We have 3 lanes here. You do have politicians, and we have some great politicians up here, and they'll make promises and pledges, and we have bureaucrats and we have business outsiders. I come in the last lane. My name is Steve Obstinik. I grew up in Stamford. I attended the U.S. Naval Academy. I did my submarine service up the road in Groton. I'm a high-tech CEO, and I've created hundreds of good-paying jobs, the type of jobs we need here in Connecticut now more than ever. What I want to talk about is how do we turn the moving vans around? So tonight I'll talk about 3 things. 1, how do we restore fiscal stability to our state? Number 2, how do we build the Connecticut jobs engine? And number 3, how do we reinvent our culture so people can actually live here, build a family here, and retire with dignity in Connecticut once again? And this will be a nasty negative fight in the fall. In Annapolis, I learned how to box. We all learn how to take a punch, throw a punch, get knocked down, get back up, and keep fighting on. And this will be a fight. So I want to fight for you. I think I have the right experience, ideas, character, and energy. Thank you very much, Steve Obstinik.
Good evening. I'm David Stemerman. I live with my wife of 20 years and our 5 children. Amazingly enough, we now have 4 teenagers in our house as of a week ago. We came here to this state to raise a family because it was the best place in the country to do so. I started a business 10 years ago. I was introducing myself as I am now to people. And the business that I built, I started from a single desk. And we built it into a business that managed billions of dollars for clients all over the world. The first year was 2008, the start of the worst financial crisis in 70 years. We in this state face a similar challenge today. The way we were able to be successful competing in one of the toughest markets on earth was by being able to see opportunities that other people did not, by being able to make tough decisions, and by being able to bring people together and work together as a team. We're going to be talking about big ideas tonight of how to improve the lives of the people of Connecticut. Big ideas that a political outsider with a business experience as an entrepreneur is expected and ready to do.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Great to be in New Canaan this evening, an FCAC powerhouse. My name is Tim Herbst, and for 8 years I had the honor and privilege of leading the town of Trumbull. Folks, I don't have to tell you that our state is in crisis. Everywhere I go, people ask the question whether tomorrow will be better than today for their children and their grandchildren. If ever there was a time to elect proven reformers and Hartford outsiders to go up to Hartford to shake things up, it's now. That's what I did in Trumbull for 8 years, balancing 8 budgets, delivering 2 tax cuts, implementing meaningful pension reform, growing the commercial economy 64.5%, and working with school officials to develop a school system that has earned national recognition. Just this week, ranked in the top 20 in the state of Connecticut. We can change Hartford, but we need to change the people we send there. And I am a candidate that is committed to go to Hartford without fear or favor, to completely upend business as usual, to tell it like it is, and to bring honest, real leadership to save our state. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening. My name's Dave Walker. I'm running for governor of Connecticut, which is the chief executive officer of the state of Connecticut. I've got over 40 years of leadership experience. I've been CEO of 5 organizations. I've got private sector, public sector, not-for-profit sector experience. I'm a Reagan, Bush 41, and Clinton presidential appointee. From a personal standpoint, I got eloped when I was 19 years old. I'm married, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, I'm a Rotarian, I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution. I want to turn Connecticut around to make it great again. You're not going to get it from a politician, you're not going to get it from somebody who doesn't have meaningful executive experience in government. I want to thank you for being here. And I look forward to the nice discussion and debate as a candidate for governor. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Good evening. I'm Prasad Srinivasan, State Representative from Glastonbury in my 4th term. We definitely have choices. You can see with me on the podium here, and of course, some of the members that are not here with us this evening. What then sets me apart? No businessman here in this race has my legislative experience. No legislator has my small business experience running my practice, small medical practice, for over 38 years. And no one in this race has the experience in healthcare, critical to what we need to do in our state to move forward. And on a lighter note, no one in this race has as many grandchildren as I do. I have 5. I am not your stereotyped Republican. I'm not a chip of the old block. I am a showcase of how inclusive our party is and why we will win in November.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. All right, so now we've had the opening statements. Now we're going to have the questions. And again, this comes off their 6 minutes. And we'll start. Ken, thank you.
Here we go, Mike. Okay, so right now, Dr. Srinivasan and Tom O'Day are up there trying to grapple with a $220 million deficit in the current fiscal year. Session ends in 3 weeks. They got to settle on some kind of new budget. What would you do right now if you were governor?
Thank you. So let me take all the suspense out of this. I can tell you both what's going to happen. We all know that the end result is nothing's going to happen in Hartford. They're going to use last year's prepayments of about $900 million, the rainy day fund, to actually balance the budget for this current fiscal year. We know it's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. Tom says I'm right. Here's the challenge that we face. It's not short-term budget issues. We have a $100 billion fiscal disaster that's on the horizon. It's these unfunded liabilities that we've got to address. And for too often, we are finding our way to short-term budget solutions and never addressing the long-term problem. And all of our short-term budget solutions only serve to make our long-term problems that much bigger. So let's forget about this fiscal year. This is a wash. We're going to drain the rainy day fund, and that's where we're heading. Let's back up a second. I had wished, before the CBAC agreement was signed, that the governor had actually issued debt to close the budget gap, because that we could have fixed in 2 years. The CBAC agreement makes it a little bit more difficult, but if we don't address the long-term problems in our pensions and retiree health care benefits, we will perpetually have unfunded budgets every single year. We don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem in our state. I'll fix it once and for all.
All right.
This is truly a long-term problem. It took the state of Connecticut 30 years to get to this point, and unfortunately, we are not going to get out of it anytime soon. So, being one who, at the local level, is responsible for authoring budgets and getting a budget approved through the legislative process, and then delivering the services and administering the budget, you know full well that you've got to be realistic with people. The first thing that I would do is I would spend some time establishing a better working relationship with the state legislature. Because you can have all the programs and all the plans and all the great ideas. If you can't get concurrence at the state legislative level, you're not going to get anything accomplished. So people need to really understand that. The problem that Connecticut faces from a financial standpoint has to be attacked from two ends. It's the spending problem that you have to turn around. And then you have to grow your base. We have to create more revenue. And we have established over a very long time that we have the ability to do that. But until you stabilize spending and reduce some of the unfunded mandates that plague municipalities and are very costly to municipalities, it's going to be very tough to do that. So over the long haul, Connecticut really has to establish itself and make it a commitment to be able to reducing spending and allow businesses to come back into our state so that we can grow our tax base. I've done that in Shelton consistently for 27 years on a smaller scale. But if you look at my tax structure, we have not raised taxes in 10 years, 10 consecutive years without a tax increase. That has allowed me to grow our base. People are moving in, and so are companies. Connecticut needs to do the same thing.
Thank you. Mayor Boughton.
I think the question had to do with what will you do first to close the very large deficit that we're facing right now, the $220 million. And there are a lot of things you can do right now because we do have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. But as mentioned, this really is a big picture kind of thing. And I'm an optimist. I'm actually excited about the opportunity that these times bring us. Why? because this provides for us the political momentum and the moment in time that we can completely change the way we do business in Hartford. We're not going to nibble around the edges and say this one's not taking a pension, this one's going to take a pension. We're going to end the current state pension system, period. It is unsustainable and unaffordable for all of us. We're going to look at the $12 billion worth of property that the state owns that sits on the books. In fact, some of the property we wouldn't even know we own, and we're going to put it to work for us. We're going to lease it, we'll sell it, whatever we need to do. Just by doing that alone, we can generate about $500 million of revenue per year. We've identified about $3.5 billion of cuts that we can make, which are considered low-hanging fruit, easy to do, per year, and we'll immediately enact them. But this is our moment, folks. And more importantly, this is the Republican moment. This is our time to show people, not just complain about things, but show people how we can run government. In Danbury, when we used Republican policies and Republican principles, we took a city that had been governed for 35 years by the Democrats and have maintained supermajorities in all of our boards of commission and the mayor's office. So we've shown that you can do it by embracing the policies that all of us believe in. And we got to be proud of being Republicans. And we got to be proud that we're going to bring our ideas and our policy positions to the state to close the gap and to set Connecticut on a new course. So I think there's opportunity here. And this is our moment in time to embrace it.
Thank you, Mayor. Anybody else want to talk on this?
Now, I'll get to the specifics in a second, but the first night I went to sea on my nuclear submarine up to the North Pole, the captain of my submarine took me back to the engineering space. And he said, Steve, I want to teach you how to do a zone inspection. We'll get into that later afterwards if you care what it is. And when we were sitting back there for 2 hours, he said, Steve, I'm going to give you the one leadership lesson you need to know in life. Leaders set tone, tone creates a culture, and culture is your destiny. Leaders sets tone, tone creates a culture, culture is your destiny. Honestly, I didn't know what he meant at the time. And I wrote it down in my notebook, and years after year of studying leadership, it finally came clear to me that right now we have a leader who is a chief tax collector. He is a chief apologizer of the situation we are in. So that creates a culture of people that we, seniors that we evict to Florida, our kids that can't afford to be here that we evict to New York, and our businesses that we exile to South Carolina. And that is our destiny. So I think this all starts with tone. This all starts with tone. And my tone is very different. My tone will start with, I will be the Chief Economic Development Officer of the state of Connecticut. It's time we stand up to Charlie Baker across the border, successful governor, jab him in the chest successfully or nicely and say, hands off our seniors, hands off our businesses. We will change policies to keep our seniors here. Number one, it starts with tone. Second thing is you work with the legislature. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, I have to tell you. Right? But what I've done all my career is build teams. Build teams and work through people. That's what I've done in the military and making 3 companies successful in the high-tech world against a lot of competition. So I'd pull in the legislative leaders and see how do we get there. I would look at things like zero-based budgeting and zero-based process redesign because there is $200 million out there to be brought in. And yes, there are long-term liabilities that we have to address and we have to have systems and processes to deal with that. But that is having a governor who's focused on tone, on a fiscal stability of our state, creating a jobs engine that we can take forward. And I'll leave you with this. We've been in a recession in Connecticut for 10 years. We know it. Our housing values are 30% less. It takes 30% to get long anywhere in this state. And if we would have recovered like any other recovery, we'd have an extra $5 billion of tax receipts in our pocket right now. And we're looking at a $4 billion deficit. So you tell me, in the end of this is about jobs and people's hearts and turning the moving vans around. Thank you for your time.
Steve, is that the answer to my question, what you were going to do in the next 3 weeks if you were governor?
And I expanded on it a little bit.
David, would you like to address this?
Question of what we're going to do about the next $200 million dramatically understates the challenges that our state is going to face. Our legislatures put forward a bill to put in place a commission to study our fiscal stability and economic growth. They've reported to our state, and what the chairman of them said is the more we looked into this problem, the worse we came to realize it being. The next governor is going to inherit a $5 billion hole in the next biennium. we have a $100 billion unfunded liability. This is a ticking time bomb. As I said, I started my business in 2008. We will face a Lehman moment in this state if we don't deal with it. What we need to be talking about is not what we would like to achieve, but how we're going to achieve it. Because happy talk and generalities aren't going to get the job done. The next governor needs to achieve two things. The first is they need to save our state from a financial crisis that threatens our families, our jobs, and our employers. We put forward on our website, davidstemerman.com, a proposal on how to reform our retirement liabilities. We've said things that no candidate for governor in this state have said, no candidate for governor of any state have said. Our pension system can't be reformed, it must be restructured. The ideas that we draw in our plan come from the ideas in the business world that have saved retirement plans and will put us on a sustainable path for our taxpayers and restore our ability to take care of our children. The second thing that our next governor needs to do is we need to be able to grow. I believe as a businessman who started my own business, who is responsible for delivering results, and invested in businesses all over the world, that I have the insight of what we need to do. And I'm going to be talking about not the goal of getting from New York City to Stanford in 30 minutes, but how we're going to get there. We're going to do it by attracting billions of dollars of private sector capital. Those are the kinds of outside-the-box thinking that we need, fresh leadership, the kind of leadership that can actually get us out of this mess and return Connecticut to be once again the best place in the country to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Tim? Ken, your question about the $200 million this fiscal year underscores an even larger problem. Because for the last 8 years that this governor has been in office, our state has been in perpetual and structural deficit. Notwithstanding the political speak and the gimmicks and the one-time revenues that have been used, just think about it. For the last 8 years, our budget has been in consistent deficit. Why is that? Expenses continue to rise at levels that people's incomes, i.e. the taxpayers, can no longer sustain. And we have declining state revenues because there's a mass exodus from the state of Connecticut. 55 people are leaving the state of Connecticut every single day. So how do we come up with a budget that is truly balanced, that does not rely upon gimmicks or one-time revenue? How do we eliminate the fiscal volatility? It's really quite simple. The next governor must, in the first 100 days, attack the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We have the most unfunded pension system of any state in the nation, and we have $21 billion in unfunded OPEB liabilities, retiree health care. So here's how it starts. We lead by example. We should not be giving out health care benefits to the political class and to people in the state that are better than what members of Congress receive. We need to get with the program. If we were on the Massachusetts model, we'd save $500 million a year. We deliver our social services in this state in a hybrid model. If we allowed those 501c3s to do more of what they do well, we could save anywhere from $450 to $650 million. If I'm elected governor, within the first 45 days of my term, I will send a budget repair bill to the Connecticut General Assembly that will focus on comprehensive pension and benefit reform and restructuring. And if that means taking on certain components of the CBAC agreement, that is what must be done. Because if you do not tame this 800-pound gorilla, what's going to happen, the new reality in our state is going to mean further cuts to educational aid, municipal aid, and programs that directly impact people. The next governor must be committed to doing this and doing it immediately. Because if we don't do it, you're going to continue to see all those for sale signs in towns like New Canaan and all over the state of Connecticut. We have to act right out of the gate.
Dave?
I'm a CPA by profession, a proven problem solver by reputation, and some national publications have dubbed me Walker Fiscal Ranger. The number one challenge this state has is how are you going to put our finances in order? Because if we don't put our finances in order, everybody is going to suffer to differing degrees over time. And in addition, Wealthy individuals are going to leave at an accelerated pace. Businesses are going to leave at an accelerated pace. You cannot sell Connecticut with a straight face until you put our finances in order. But once we do, we have a lot to sell. To answer your question, $220 million is about 1% of state spending, but since it's so late in the year, it's 4% of what we've got left in this fiscal year. I would cut spending, including unpaid furloughs if necessary. That's what I would do. But what we have to do is that we have to treat the disease. We've got to override the state employee benefits contract using the sovereign powers of the state. We need to legislate those benefits based on benchmarking of private sector benefit programs. We need to make a firm commitment to funds so people will actually get what they've been promised rather than the false promise they have now. I've got a framework that will save us $30 billion out of $71 billion. And the benefits will be as good or better than a Fortune 100 company. We can afford it, sustain it, we'll fund it. We've got to restructure our welfare system. It's the most generous in the country while maintaining a solvent, sustainable, secure social safety net. It's full of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. It discourages marriage. It discourages work. We have to right-size government. It's got way too much management and supervisors. We're not leveraging technology for customer service and to be able to reduce cost. We've got to be able to focus on hiring and paying and disciplining people based on skills, knowledge, and performance rather than tenure and length of service. That's the kinds of things that we have to do in order to cut spending. Spending has gone up 3 times the rate of inflation since 1992. And believe it or not, median household income in this state has not kept pace with inflation since 1992. This is the most important election in the history of our state. The number one thing you have to do is who's got the courage, the credibility, the commitment, the communication skills to put this state's finances in order. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Prasad?
Most of us in this room know the nickname for Massachusetts. We used to call it Taxachusetts. And look what Massachusetts has done. Turned it around, and it is a state now where our jobs are going, our businesses are going, leaving behind what I heard the other day and cringed at what we were called in Connecticut, Patheticate. So that is the nickname we have now, and we will change it. I will change it as your next governor. How? Number one, you've got to look at the inefficiencies we have in our state. Every state agency, right on day one, will be on zero-based budgeting. With a pad and a pen, every agency will have to take a step back and look at us and say, what is it they're spending as far as services, and what is it as far as administrative costs? Has it been done before? Yes. Georgia has done that and shown that it has saved them millions of dollars. That's the first step I would take. I would look at the worker-to-manager ratio. I have a small business practice. I'm a physician, as I said earlier, with about 15 employees. And all of us, including me, we report to one manager, one supervisor. Whereas in the state, it is 3 to 4 workers have one manager or a supervisor. Why would we need that layer of bureaucracy? I would look at that, once again saving us millions of dollars. And if we look at, we talked about pension reform. We definitely have to do that, and I'm sure we'll get into more details as this evening goes on, assuming that question is going to be asked. But I'll just give you a loophole we have in our pension plan, which I would address right away, and it can be done without any legal challenges. I'm sure all of you, far removed as you are in New Canaan, know the horrors that happened both in Middletown Forensic. And there, the nurse who was suspended because of the atrocities he committed on a patient knowingly, willfully, is suspended. And guess what? He's suspended with $7,000 of pension money. And when he got that, I just assumed it's just a lump sum, one time you get $7,000, good riddance. No, it is $7,000 on a monthly basis. He's still allowed to collect under the current system. So the waste that we have, the fraud that we have, that's how we would address and make sure that we are no longer called Connecticut, and we move on to the good old days in 1980 when I chose to come to Connecticut and for me and my family to make a life here.
Thank you, Doc. So just to give you an idea, now we've gone through one round of questions, and they have a certain amount of between 3 and 5 minutes left. So we're moving along, and I feel like I'm compelled to say, just for the record, honey, I'm sorry, but my pension after 15 years is only going to be $300 a month. So don't get excited with these responses. Gary, you're going to be next.
Okay.
Question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you a question about manufacturing in Connecticut. As we all know, manufacturing at one time was, of course, the heart and soul of our Connecticut economy. And it was really what this state at one time was known for. But over the years, the number of jobs in manufacturing have, of course, dramatically declined. And the decline began long before, of course, 1990. But some recent figures from the Connecticut Department of Labor revealed that from 1990 to 2017, manufacturing jobs declined in Connecticut from 305,700 to 156,000. And right here in Fairfield County, 44,500 manufacturing jobs were lost during that time period. So my question is very specific, and I would like very specific solutions to this question. As our state's next governor, first of all, will you deem it necessary to reverse the decline in manufacturing? And if so, tell me what you're going to do about it.
Thank you, Gary. First up would be Mark. Ready? Going left to right.
It is true that once upon a time we made everything on the planet in Connecticut. And I run a city that also did the same thing. And when the manufacturing left, it created a big economic void in the state and also created blight. So I've spent the last 26 years reinventing that city. And we are home today to 4.5 million square feet of Class A office space, some of which includes manufacturing and light manufacturing. And manufacturing has changed dramatically today. It's not what it used to be. The old industrial, blue-collar type with the smokestacks and the sewage going into our rivers and things like that. It's much more sophisticated. And so in order for any business to grow, whether it's a manufacturer or whether it is an office complex, you have got to be affordable. Connecticut is not affordable. Even for the people who choose to live here, who can afford to live here, they choose not to because of things like the estate tax. So all this affordability affects everyone. And so I think that I've demonstrated over my tenure as mayor that when you have a stable tax rate, as an example, for the last 27 years, my mill rate has either, for 20 times, has either stayed the same or been lowered. So that has allowed me to grow my base because I am more affordable than my competitors. Connecticut is not affordable with its competitors. There are many things that have to be done. And our tax structure is one of them. Lowering the corporate income tax would certainly help create more jobs. The cost of energy in Connecticut is probably the highest in the nation. And so when you have factors like that that are weighing in on you, of course they're going to flee to other places. So it really becomes understanding about how to create an affordable environment. Many of this stuff was created by the legislature in terms of our spending and our regulation and our tax structure. And a lot of that has to be pulled back to correct it, to encourage businesses to come here. We can't keep giving tax abatement to businesses to get them to stay in Connecticut. If you have to pay people to come here, you are doing something wrong. In my 27 years as mayor, I haven't given 10 cents to anybody to come to my city. And on any given day, I have 25,000 people to commute into work. We've become an employment hub in Connecticut because we are more affordable than everyone else. And I can't underscore that point enough. And that affordability factor really runs the entire spectrum on how we deliver services, our energy costs, our tax structure, you name it. So until people understand how all of this thing works, it's going to be very difficult to be able to solve the problem. When you've grown up in the system like I have, under 4 different governors, I've watched them all do the same thing, all get the same result. I got a very different result because I did something different. I held the line on spending, and I held the line on taxes, and I've grown.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address that question? Steve?
Yeah, I think I'm the only manufacturer in this race. My last company, Quintel, we manufacture smart antennas for AT&T and Verizon. We bend metal, we put software in them, and now, after struggling in the early days, we sell on 5 continents around the world. And yes, manufacturing has been hit here in Connecticut, and I manufacture in the U.S., but I have not been able to manufacture here. Partly, yes, the automation effects is one, but also the cost of doing business here is prohibitively too high. The cost of energy here is prohibitively too high. So what do we have to do specifically to address it? Do you all realize we have 42 colleges in this state? 42. And yes, we've lost some Fortune 500 companies, but we still have 17 here. So we need to look around industries that we do well, and a specific industry that we do really well is advanced manufacturing. We still have the world's largest helicopter maker, submarine maker, and jet engine maker here. They have not moved out yet. So we need to take our 42 colleges and create, I think, 2 knowledge corridors. One from Hartford down to New Haven, and one from Groton to Greenwich, an inverted T. And we have to take those 42 colleges at the trade school level, the community college level, the applied research level, and actually talk to the businesses who are here, which government doesn't do in Hartford, and ask them, what type of kids do we need educated? So we can create a supply chain of trained kids to fill the 14,000 jobs that Electric Boat has open right now. So that when these kids graduate, they actually have a job here in Connecticut. As we structurally look at things like energy costs, Rhode Island and Massachusetts are running rings around us. They put this wind farm off of Block Island. 4 or 5 years later, we're finally thinking about how do we bring down energy costs. So we need to bring down the cost of living here, the cost of energy. We need to build knowledge centers that bring together our universities and our businesses to create a supply chain of trained people to work here so we don't have to evict them to South Carolina. This is all possible. There are great examples around the state, which I'd love to talk to you more about. But once again, I'm the only manufacturer in this race, Republican or Democrat, I believe, who's dealt with these problems and had to make these decisions on a U.S. and international basis. Thank you.
Tim? Gary, I appreciate that question because the years that you cited with those figures, 2 things happened. We instituted the state income tax, and the growth of government under both Republican and Democratic administrations grew at rates that were unsustainable. So here's what I would do to invest in manufacturing and making a commitment to it. The first thing I'm going to do as governor is tackle the regulatory environment in the state. The regulatory environment from our state agencies is just as oppressive and punitive as our tax structure here in the state of Connecticut. You've heard the horror stories, the DEP, the DOT, the Department of Consumer Protection, people waiting years to secure permits to open their business, grow their business, and create jobs. We need a governor that is committed to appointing commissioners of state agencies that are charged with permitting that will tackle the regulatory environment. Number 2 is a commitment to education and recognizing that if we're going to move people into these manufacturing jobs, the next governor must be committed to not only our colleges and universities, but most especially our community college system and our VOTEC schools. And we must create greater synergy between the 2. So when our kids graduate from these schools, we have a talented pool to go into these manufacturing jobs. We've got to reduce the cost of doing business. And energy is outrageous in the state of Connecticut. I don't need to tell you how expensive it is when we pay the highest utility costs of any state in the continental United States. And we're going to get energy costs under control by making sure that utility companies no longer call the shots in Hartford. And finally, the next thing we must do, if we are to become an export superpower and a manufacturing hub, is invest in our infrastructure. Bradley Airport, one of the longest runways in the country, presents opportunity. Southwestern Connecticut, preferably Bridgeport, could use a commercial commercial airport, to take stress off of Lower Fairfield County with those people going to New York, and to get a true transportation hub in place so we can export the manufacturing and the materials that we're producing in our state. I'm committed to doing that as governor.
Thank you, Tim. Dave?
Connecticut has been known as the arsenal of democracy. And we still have a lot of manufacturing in this state that's defense related. And one of the first things that we need to do is to help make sure that the education community, business, and government come together to make sure that we're training people with the right kinds of skills to fill the jobs that already exist and the ones that are expected to exist. John Ratzenberger, who played Norm on Cheers, was born 3 blocks from my house. He's a friend of mine, and he's a huge advocate of manufacturing. But the truth is, if we want to do manufacturing, it's going to have to be precision and specialty manufacturing. We're going to have to deregulate. We're going to have a more competitive tax structure, and we've got to get our energy costs under control. My wife Mary and I moved here a number of years ago, and when we moved here, we were shocked to find out that the electric rates were double what they were in Northern Virginia. There's no good reason for that. And when I'm governor, we're going to get to the bottom of it, and we're going to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Prasad?
Manufacturing in Connecticut is alive and well. It is advanced manufacturing. That's where we are at this stage. It was mentioned, we talked about electric boat, Sikorsky, Pratt & Whitney. And look at the medical technologies we just saw in Guilford. They're going to come out with a scan. For $2,000, you can carry your own scan with you so your medical condition can be diagnosed faster, easier, and the physician and the medical community can be in touch with you. So advanced manufacturing is live and thriving in Connecticut. We have 25,000 jobs right now, as we speak, that have gone unfilled because of lack of talented workforce. And that's what I would address as your next governor. Make sure we have a pool of talented workforce, right from school, through the colleges, community colleges, and regular colleges. And the most important partner, of course, is industry. Form that combination, that wonderful triage, and we will be able to solve the issue that we have work available in Connecticut. We do not have talented workforce. I will address that issue as your next governor.
Thank you, Doc. Mike?
Okay, so we're talking in generalities still. And Prasad, you're right. There's 23,000 manufacturing jobs available in our state right now that are good, high-paying careers. But no one's addressing why we can't find talent to fill those jobs. You don't have to travel all that far. Take a drive to Bridgeport. Go to the Housatonic Community College. Our state recognized we have a void in talent to fill the manufacturing jobs, and they decided they were going to tackle it the way our state always tackles our problems, by building an advanced manufacturing technology center at the Housatonic Community College. We've invested $30 million of your taxpayer money to build a state-of-the-art school. It's not your typical power drills and belt sanders. This is really high-tech equipment you can build parts for the space shuttle. How many students do you think are in the class? 36. Why? Because in order to teach at the Housatonic Community College, you've got to have a master's degree. You could spend 30 years at Pratt or 30 years at Sikorsky working on the very same equipment that we're training our young people at the Housatonic Community College. You've got to retire from your career, go back to get a master's degree, just to come back to Housatonic to teach, making $52,000 a year. We have 2 instructors. That's why there's 36 students. The sad reality is we've got many manufacturing jobs available where the companies are willing to pay the $7,000 tuition and pay the students for the 9 months they're in the program, if they'll just commit to taking a high-paying career when they get out for 5 years. And we somehow cannot find a way to equate quality, years of experience to a master's degree that's probably most likely useless in that setting. These are all fixable problems. We can fix this manufacturing club.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to let scapegoat.
Our state. It's devastated communities. It's led people to lose their jobs and devastated the whole towns around them. So it's a tremendous problem for us. On the other hand, it's a tremendous opportunity, as you've heard from many on stage. We still have one of the most productive workforces on the planet. The question again is, how are we going to fix this problem? I see as an example what Governor Rick Scott did in Florida. He was somebody who came to the job as a business person, and he approached businesses as saying, what can I do to help you? He's actually come to Connecticut to recruit. We should adopt his game plan. What he says to a manufacturing company is, first, you need a piece of land? Tell me where you'd like it to be, and I'll get it zoned for you. Then he says, what's the cost structure that you need here? Let me help you with that. Well, in Florida, they have a 0% income tax, and we're going to be releasing a tax plan next week that's going to get our taxes down lower too. And the third thing that you've heard a lot of people talk about is the quality of the workforce. I need people to do exactly what I need in my factory. And so what he does is he says, I'm going to bring the business to the local community college. We're going to design the curriculum. We're going to train the people there. We're going to create apprenticeship programs. That's the how we're going to do it. But it's an approach as an entrepreneur and as a business person in this seat as governor that's actually going to get it done. That's what I would bring to the governorship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I think we have time for two more questions. The next question is going to be Ken, and it's going to be directed to Mayor Boughton to start.
Yeah, Mayor. More and more young people are getting involved in politics, especially after the Parkland shooting. What are you telling them and everyone else about gun safety and the Second Amendment?
Thank you for that question, Ken. Look, the fact of the matter is, and I actually was talking to a high school group of kids this morning in Fairfield who had a very similar question to that. How do you balance the rights of people to legally and lawfully own a gun with some of the horrors that we see, not just in Parkland, but also obviously in Sandy Hook and all across the country? And I think we have to come to the fundamental understanding that the reason people commit violence is not because of the instrument of their violence, it's because of what is inside of them. And the fact of the matter is when we don't address mental health issues, when we don't address breaking down barriers and allowing people to talk to each other, when we don't address training for our teachers and for our security officials within buildings, we have these horror stories that you heard about. In Parkland in particular, that young man had been identified by fellow students. And they had gone to the police and said, you got to do something about this guy. He's going to hurt somebody. And the system failed those kids because they didn't do anything, because they made dozens of trips out to the house, and there was no mechanism to be able to provide the appropriate mental health care for that particular person so that he didn't do what he did. Here in Connecticut, you should be concerned. Because of the rash of bills that were passed after Sandy Hook, one of them, in particular the mental health provision, has not been funded, and the funding has been cut dramatically by this governor. So it's really simple but difficult what we have to do. We have to protect the constitutional right for people to own a gun. That's, I don't think, in dispute by anybody up on this stage. Secondly, we got to make sure that we break down barriers amongst our caregivers so that the police can talk to the youth agencies can talk to the police, and everybody can talk to the schools, so that there's no siloing off of information, and later on we don't find out that there's been somebody out to the house dozens of times. Secondly, we need to make sure that we do training. You know what, at my local high school I have 4 police officers, 2 inside, 2 outside, and I have an entire crew of security officials within the building. Those people aren't trained the same way as the people that are probably in this building and in other high schools throughout the state of Connecticut. We need a common platform for training out there so that everybody's trained the same way, because what we saw in Sandy Hook was that we had a response that was all-encompassing. It was a regional response. It wasn't just a singular response. We can do that as well. But by breaking down barriers, by training people the right way, we can protect Second Amendment rights, and most importantly, we can protect our students, which are really our prime objective here.
Thank you, Mark. And again, we don't have to answer questions because there's a limited amount of time. Does anybody else want to answer this question? Okay. All right, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. Okay, Dave.
So the tragedy in Parkland reminds us all too well of what happened in Newtown. And as the father of 5 children who has children going to school each day, there's no responsibility more important as a parent and then as a governor than keeping our children safe. We did a lot after the last tragedy, and the question is, what more can we do? Too much of it is a discussion about emotion rather than what's the practical solution. We had a proposal from Representative Rob Sampson that I thought would actually get something done. He said we should do 3 things that would have made a difference in Newtown. The first is we should have better funding for mental health, because so many people pulling the trigger are in and out of our mental health system. The second is we should do more for law enforcement, provide funding and training. And the third thing that he said is that we should provide security in our schools. Our children are precious. Why aren't we providing security for them? How are we going to pay for them? He recommended that we no longer spend money on politicians for bumper stickers and lawn signs, and we take that money and put it towards protecting our children. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Dave. Dave Walker.
Well, first, as governor, I would protect and defend the constitutional rights of law-abiding, mentally healthy, and non-violent people to bear arms. At the same point in time, we clearly have a problem with background checks. We clearly have a problem with mental health. We clearly have a problem with regard to school security. We also have certain devices that can take a legal weapon and convert it effectively into an illegal weapon, which is something we need to be concerned about. We also have to look at our education funding formula, and we have to focus on 3 things. How many kids do we have that are special needs, no matter where they are, New Canaan, Bridgeport, wherever? Secondly, how many are eligible for free and reduced price lunch, which is a proxy for poverty? And then we need to think about what we're going to do on school security in a way that protects our children, in a way that effectively uses risk management principles that's affordable and sustainable over time.
Thank you. Prasad?
We already have one of the toughest gun laws in the entire nation, California, Connecticut. But what is wrong with our state? 2 things that I would address as your next governor. A, make sure our schools are safe. There is a plan. If you remember in the bill that was passed, it asks for every school to turn in their school security plan and a lockdown protocol. Take the guess as to how many schools, after all these years since Sandy Hook, have complied. Less than 50%. So that's what's missing. We are not implementing what Tamade and I and the others in the legislature pass. And funding for mental health, as was addressed, has not been there at all. It's just been entirely stripped. So when we do not take care of 2 important components, you can see a lot more needs to be done, and it will be done as your next governor without compromising our Second Amendment at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Mike? Mike Handler, and then Mark, sorry. Sorry, my fault.
So this is an interesting question to get in this auditorium. I think most people know me as the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Stamford. For many of you in this audience also know me as the Emergency Management Director for the town of New Canaan. I often say things such as, for me, our problems are not academic and our solutions are not theoretical. That's because I've spent the last 6 years fixing the financial mess in the city of Stamford, rolling up my sleeves and actually doing the work that we're talking about with our pensions, with our balance sheet, with our retiree health care benefits. It's correct, there's nothing more important that our next governor is going to have to do than keep all of us safe, especially our children. But in my role in New Canaan, it's a role that I take incredibly seriously, and there are people in this room that I work with every day to make sure our 4,200 students in our schools are safe. This auditorium is special for an important reason. In 2013, shortly after Sandy Hook, we held an active shooter training in this very auditorium, where we put our public safety first responders, our administrators, our teachers, and our parents as patients through an exercise in this very school. We've done a series of them since then. Public safety and school safety is not theoretical for me. I actually work on it every day. We just held an active shooter training at E-School last week. Here's what we need to do as a state. We need to make available to every school, whether they can afford it or not, a school resource officer in every school. And I'll tell you why. We've got one in the high school, one in this school. We have a fiscal crisis to deal with. We cannot be the limiting factor to putting a trained law enforcement officer in one of our schools. If it costs $40 or yes, we've got crisis advisory boards in all of our school districts. I work with ours every month. We meet and we train consistently to improve our policies to make sure our kids are safe.
For those of us who run municipalities, the number one calling is the public safety. And it's all encompassing, whether it's in the schools, in the park, work. Speaking realistically and not promising pie in the sky things. But I've got to tell you that some things that are systemic in society, like opioid abuse and gun violence in America, the preventative measures. You know, I look at the video game industry in this country that has desensitized 2 generations of kids.
Mayor, sorry, we're out of time.
And we do nothing about that.
Apologize. Thank you. Sorry about that. I'd be fair to everybody. Go over. I apologize. Anybody else want to talk on this subject? I would, just a raise of hands, how many of you would support teachers being armed if they're specially trained? Anybody? How many would, no clap, how many would want or
Do no.
They're not allowed.
And I'm surprised I'm quiet tonight. But look around. You have police officers here tonight protecting you and I. The president is protected by guns. The vice president by guns. Banks are protected by guns. Federal buildings by guns. Even jewelry stores are protected by guns. Yet, the most precious things in our lives, our children, and I have 3 of them, we put a sign in school that says gun-free zone. It is ridiculous. If I were your governor, would be an executive order that every school will have an armed guard over there protecting our children. If you and I are being protected, our children deserve that too. Thank you.
All right. Ready for the last question? I think Ken, you're up, or Gary? All right, Gary, last question for this half.
Okay, sure.
Take a brief break, and then we'll come back to the second half, and everybody will have another 6 minutes.
I'd like to hear the views of our gubernatorial candidates regarding some infrastructure problems that we have in the state. Right now, Connecticut is ranked as having some of the very worst roads in the entire country. Additionally, the Connecticut Department of Transportation's Bureau of Engineering currently rates 33% of our bridges as in good condition, while 57% are rated as fair and 10% as poor. Moreover, 66% of our state's railroad bridges are rated as substandard. Now, with deficits projected and the DOT's revenue apparently declining, I'd like to know what you, as governor, will do to improve our state's roads and bridges without revenue. And furthermore, I should add that President Trump's infrastructure plan places 80% of the burden on state and local governments. So how are you going to handle this problem?
All right, Peter, you're up first.
Yeah, that would be fine. The biggest problem that we have in our state is the scope, size, and reach of government. That is collapsing our state. What we spend right now, we can no longer sustain it. What we provide in our state right now can no longer be sustained. In order for us to turn the state around, we have to create the environment for growth. Why don't you do this? Let's start by removing the state income tax for anyone who's making less than $100,000. Then you go to the corporate taxes. You lower the corporate tax. You lower the sales tax. You lower as many taxes as you can. You refuse the tolls and any other tax or fees that will be placed upon you and I to make it easier for people to create wealth and equity. That will strengthen the purchasing power of the dollar in our state so we can invest it again and create jobs. Then you go to the state agencies with the exception of law enforcement. You downsize them 14% right away, and you save $1.3 billion, and all the essential services will still be provided to you and I. Every state agency that passes a regulation should be required to repeal 4. That will make it easier for people and businesses to do business in our state. Mandates, unfunded mandates that are coming from Hartford should be eased up so that businesses and people can again create jobs and equity in our state. Then you go to the entitlement system that we have created in our state. If you're receiving welfare in our state right now, you make $40,000 doing nothing. That is $20 an hour. If you give people 3 years in the system, and if they are able bodies, during this time you provide training to them and you drug test them to make sure that that doesn't become a way of life to them, but a safety net. We're going to have to push back with the entitlements that we have created in our state. We have been rewarding failure for way too long. We've been penalizing people who are producing in our state, including businesses. From 1992 to present, we have collected $126 billion state income tax.
Mr. Lumaj.
I'm going to get to that.
Could we get to infrastructure,
We should have asked that
please?
question to the Democrats too, because they caused this problem, not the Republicans.
Okay,
Republicans are nowhere to be seen in Hartford. It is the Democrats, the failed liberal policies in Hartford that have caused the problem that we have. So unless we put this house in order by downsizing the government, we're not going to be able to save the money that we need for the infrastructure.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, I appreciate that.
All right, we're going left to right. Steve, you're next.
So if you didn't notice on the way in, I have this RV. We call it RV1 instead of Air Force One. And I think I've hit every pothole on 95 and 91 imaginable. So infrastructure is high on my list. We spend about $1.5 billion a year on infrastructure or so. The problem we've had for years is that politicians in Hartford sweep out money from the special transportation fund because it's a special piggy bank for Hartford politicians to fund the fixed costs, they say, of rising pension costs. So what we first have to do is have a special transportation fund that is special that they can't put their hands in the cookie jar. That's number one. Number two, we have to have a full audit of our transportation infrastructure projects, because I have to tell you, what it costs us to build roads in Connecticut is astronomical compared to the rest of the country. In the Navy, we had a saying, it's not what you expect, it's what you inspect. And that's what we've got to do with our transportation fund. I have 15 seconds left, and let's all hope RV starts and doesn't hit a pothole tonight. Thank you.
All right. David?
Gary, rebuilding our transportation infrastructure is vitally important, and particularly what we know here in New Canaan being on the train line. This is one of our signature issues. The question is, how do we do it? We have a plan to attract billions of dollars of private capital to rebuild our trains, our roads, and our airports. To get our train from New York City to Stamford in 30 minutes and to New Haven in 60 minutes. And to make Bridgeport and Hartford into major logistics hubs. We need the private sector as our partner to do these major projects, to execute them, to bring them on time, and we're going to give a lot more detail on these plans over the course of our campaign. Thank you.
The next governor, in addition to tackling a $4.6 billion budget deficit and $71 billion at least in unfunded liabilities, The transportation crisis that this state is in will be the biggest challenge for the next governor. Show of hands, how many of you sit hours on the highway every day? How many of you take the train every day? Our highways have never been worse. Metro North has never been worse. And here's why this is happening. Just earlier this year, Governor Malloy canceled $4 billion in approved infrastructure projects because we don't even have the capacity to go to Wall Street to borrow money because the Special Transportation Fund is on the brink of insolvency. Now, why is that? Politicians raided the fund time and again to artificially balance the budget. They've encumbered too many operational costs. If I'm elected governor, here's what we're going to do. There's going to be a forensic audit of the Special Transportation Fund. We're going to put a real lockbox in place, not a pretend politician lockbox, a real lockbox so that money goes to our roads, our highways, and our bridges. We're going to come up with a capital plan that makes sense, that is consistent, annual, sensible, affordable, that invests in our roads, our highways, and our bridges, because it affects our economic development. We have got to get serious about how we're going to fund the Special Transportation Fund and fund these projects, because if we don't do that and we don't invest in our infrastructure, we lose our competitive edge from an economic development standpoint.
Thank you, Tim. All right, Dave?
Thank you. When you come into Connecticut, you see a sign. Welcome to Connecticut. Closed for business. Closed for tourism. Prepare to stop. 95 is a parking lot. The Merit is a park. I'm running for governor of our great state. I'm putting 4,000 miles a month on my car. So I understand firsthand what the situation is with regard to mobility in this state. It's particularly acute in Fairfield County, but it's not only a problem in Fairfield County. We have something in this state called trust funds. They're government trust funds. You can't trust them. They're not funded. The money that's supposed to be earmarked does not go there, or if it does, it gets swept out. We're now paying administrative expenses to the trust fund. The Department of Transportation is grossly mismanaged. The amount that we pay per mile to do paving is outrageous. The amount of overhead that we have is unprecedented in this country. And so the fact is that we have to restructure. Oh, I'm sorry. And I can guarantee you, if I'm your next governor, it'll get done.
Thank you very much, Dave.
"30 seconds is what I have left. No tolls. Number two, the money that we collect every year on an annual basis, we collect between the gasoline tax and the petroleum tax, $750 million. That money is not spent on our roads and our bridges, goes into the general fund, and you know what happens to that general fund. That will stop on day one.
Thank you, Doc. Mike.
The real problem is we're terrible at infrastructure projects. I want to create a regional infrastructure bank, the Connecticut Infrastructure Bank, and get transportation infrastructure out of the hands of our state government. We can do this by putting $1 billion that's in our Special Transportation Fund into the bank and leveraging up private capital to go to work on our rails, our bridges, and our roads. We don't need a forensic audit looking backwards. We've got to look forward. We've got to spend not $1 billion, we need tens of billions of dollars in investment in our infrastructure. And I want to get it out of the hands of government who can't do it well, into the hands of the private sector where they can do it much more efficiently and get more money spent more efficiently for us. Thank you.
All right, Mark. Let me be very clear here. The days of our commuters being treated as second-class citizens are over when Mark Boughton becomes the governor of this state. And let me also be very clear. There's 3 simple things we can do right now for our transportation fund to be able to start working on all of the problems that have just been described. One is we can prioritize our general bond obligations. In other words, we can set aside a certain amount of borrowing each year specifically for those particular projects that need to be done. 2, we're going to have to staff up the Department of Transportation because we're short on engineers. So even if you get the money, you're not going to be able to execute the project for years. How many times have you been out driving and see some intersection and the corner being done and you can't figure out what happened? Well, that was because it was planned in 1962, and they're finally being able to do the work. And then, that's true. And then finally, 3, I will strap myself to the entrance of I-95 if they ever put tolls up in the state. There is no way we're going to let that happen. It is time for us to take back our money and take back our state.
Thank you. Peter's got a few minutes left. We're going to give him one more minute.
I'm going to sell 2 of them. Mark, you want to buy one? I'll sell 2 minutes to the other ones. No, for real, it's capitalism. I can sell them. I got 3 minutes to go. So, look, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to need a governor who has the character, the fortitude, and the backbone to get the job done. Get an outsider. I'm a complete outsider. I don't think anybody can be more outsider than I am, actually. But I would go to Hartford and dismantle the mentality of business as usual. One of the reasons that Hartford is scared of or afraid of a conservative is because we have a lot of common sense. And what we need in Hartford is common sense conservative principles to resolve the challenges that we're facing right now. I haven't known anything else in my life but challenges. I was born in slavery. I was 20 years old when I escaped slavery. I didn't speak a word of English when I came to this country. I didn't have any money. I was taken in by a church. I overcame all of those challenges. You don't think I'm going to be able to overcome the challenges that we have in Hartford? Because I don't know anyone anything and nobody owes me anything. I'm not going to be owned by anyone but you. I will get the job done if you give me a chance to go over there. Thank you very much.
All right.
You know, mic's on? There we go. Okay. In 1997, we cut the gas tax by, I think it was about 13 cents. And that's been about $4 billion of tax receipts which we would have put on the roads. And we probably wouldn't be in this situation if we had a lockbox around us here. So I would say, first of all, I'm an evidence-based person. I work with the legislature to see if that's the only way out. I think there are better ways approaching it, which is not raising revenues, but going hard at spending. We have a spending problem in this state. Over the last 10 years, our spending has gone up 3% a year, every year, and economic growth has gone down negatively. So there's a correlation between rising government spending bad and falling economy is bad. So we cannot keep spending our way out of here. I want to work with the legislature and the leadership there to find a way out other than putting 4 cents more on hardworking people of Connecticut.
Thank you. David,
So I'm glad I have an opportunity to speak a little bit more about this important topic. The reason that we have a shortfall in transportation is that the money has been raided from our transportation fund. There's a proposal from one of your colleagues, Fred Wilms, who I spoke to about this, of just saying let's take the taxes that we have from the gas taxes and just move it back to the transportation fund and let's fix this problem. But the bigger issue is how are we going to fix this problem on a multi-year basis? And I come back to this idea of who do you trust with the multi-billion-dollar projects that we need to do? Getting the train from here to New York City in about half an hour is going to require replacing bridges that are estimated to cost billions of dollars. I don't trust our Connecticut Department of Transportation to do that work, and you shouldn't either. But what I've seen traveling all over the world is that the main transportation assets, the airports around the world, in Asia, in Europe and Latin America, the toll roads, they are operated by the private sector. Those are the places that have the expertise to take on these multi-billion-dollar engineering projects. In addition, they're going to operate it much cheaper for us. So we spend $425,000 a year in our highways. It costs $180,000 for the country as a whole. When we bring in the private sector, we're going to reduce it. As an entrepreneur, I'm looking for opportunities that are outside the box. I'm looking to eat my cake and have it too. By bringing in the private sector, that's what we're going to do.
All right, just to be clear, go ahead, that's good, but I want to know, to answer the question, before the end of this session, do you either support increasing the gas tax by 4 cents or cutting rail service and raising fares? I think, Steve, you had said you would look to cut other ways, but you would support it if need be.
Yeah.
David, I don't know if you said you would support, this doesn't count towards your time, but just to clarify,
yeah.
You would support the sales tax, or the gas tax increase.
No, I would look for other things first. Like there's a new car tax. Whenever you buy a new car tax, that has been taken in and
but
taken.
That can't happen until next year.
That can't happen until next year?
That can't be collected until next year. So the question becomes, what are you going to do between now? I was told by a number of people that we need to get to answer the question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to interrupt you if you're not answering the question. So I'm sorry. So hold on. Let me finish. To Steve, the question is simply, we can raise the gas tax by 4 cents and keep fares the same and keep the schedule the same, or you say look for it somewhere else. But remember, we only have until the end of the session.
In the business world, there are always other options. I think that's a false argument to say there's only 2 options. I will work with the legislature to address it. It isn't just black or white in this. There are other ways to solve this.
Fair enough. I will tell you that out of the transportation fund, 60% of it goes towards reimbursement to fares throughout the state. So there's only 40% that they can fund or fudge with. But to your point, I appreciate that.
So just quickly on, so Steve, this is an area where the two of us are entrepreneurs on the stage, business people come up with creative answers. It's black and white, either or. I don't accept the premise. We're going to get it done in a very different way.
Okay. Tim?
I don't accept the premise either for this reason. Last legislative session, transportation advocates told you good people in the legislature that if you gave us the extra % on the sales tax and did not cap bonding, we would be able to fund the infrastructure projects needed to be done. And then what happened after you blessed that and voted for it, based upon the representations that were made to you? After that, they canceled $4 billion in projects because they said they couldn't pay for them. So here's what I think you should do. I don't think you should do either. If I were in the legislature, this is just my opinion. If the Transportation Committee has subpoena power, I would subpoena Commissioner Redeker to the Transportation Committee to answer the following questions. And I hope he's watching because I'm going to ask them right now. I would like Commissioner Redeker to explain to me why he has encumbered significant operational costs, long-term operational costs to the tune of a 60% increase. In many instances, those operational costs will exceed Dan Malloy's tenure and his tenure. He should be required to come before you and explain what those operational costs are, where the increases lie, and if those costs are necessary. I would like Commissioner Redeker to explain to me why we have spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on a busway to nowhere when we're not investing in I-95 and the Merritt Parkway and Metro North. I would like Commissioner Redeker to explain to me why we're making all these investments in a rail system that hugs the 91 corridor at a time when we're proposing increasing fares for Metro North, decreasing services for Shoreline East and Metro North. It's a question of priority, folks, and here's what I can promise you. When I'm elected governor, we're going to hire a new DOT commissioner in this state, and we're going to get to work fixing our problems, and we're not going to continue to do it on the backs of hardworking men and women by raising the gas tax, instituting tolls, or coming up with a new revenue stream. Because what this government has demonstrated, this current government, is an insatiable appetite to misappropriate. The more revenue you give them, the more they will find ways to squander it. It is time for accountability.
All right, thank you, Tim. Dave.
Don't start my clock till I start talking now. All right?
That's 5 seconds.
I've already answered in the last session that there's gross mismanagement and incompetence in state government, especially with regard to the Department of Transportation. Secondly, when the Democrats want to do something, what is the answer? More money, more money, more money. That's what this is. You know, give me 4 more cents in gas tax and I promise you I'll do this. We've heard this too many times. No increase in the gas tax. No tolls. Figure out a way to save the money some other way, because I do not trust these people. You know how you can tell when a career politician is not telling you the truth? Their lips move. All right, and that's what we're getting from the DOT and too many people that are career politicians in Hartford, in the Democratic administration, over and over again. It's time for truth. It's time for tough choices in order to create a better future.
Thank you, Dave. And as a lawyer politician, I'm in big trouble. My lips moving. Go ahead, Doc.
no new taxes. So whether it be tolls, whether it be the gasoline tax or the tire tax, the term that we have talked about as well in the legislature. Going back to what I said just before intermission, we have $750 million dedicated for this reason, for transportation. And guess what? We don't use it for transportation. That's what I would be doing. We want to make sure that we streamline our DOT. The DOT spends, as Tim just talked about, in services that are not really services for you or me, but administrative costs. And that's what we would need to make sure we cut and streamline as well. And I'm a strong proponent of private-public partnerships. That's how it's done across the globe, where private partners come in, partner with the state, and it's a win-win situation. So when we look at all of those things as options, A, as your governor, and B, with an elected majority in the House as well as the Senate, that's what we need going forward. No one person can get this job done. Any one of us who thinks that a governor alone can get everything done, they don't know what they're talking about. We will work as a party, as a Republican Party, to get the majority in the House, the majority in the Senate, and obviously the constitutional offices as well. So together, we will make the changes we need to make, A, in transportation, and all the other things we need to do so Connecticut can be revived and becomes prosperous again.
Thank you, Doc. My boss just told me that I need to move things on a little bit, so if you could just quickly, if you want to respond, go ahead, Mayor.
Quickly. Really, the issue really here is trust. I mean, this government and governor has lied to us, misled us a million different times. Look at the issue of the foundations out in eastern Connecticut. We promised those poor people aid with about $100 million. We haven't held the insurance companies accountable to make them pay for that problem that's going on out there. And let me tell you something else. And about an administration, I would never send a commissioner out to talk to various cogs and people and beg for more money. That is offensive to every person in here who has been taxed to death. We don't need a new tax plan. It's not a binary choice. We need a new commissioner who brings the solution, not the problem to us. And by the way, the answer also is not adding $3 per tire for our cars. How absurd is that? How offensive is that? When we're hemorrhaging people every single day to go out and pick their pocket again. We operate at a common cash pool. Tom, you're telling me we can't find the money out of billions of dollars to be able to fund the DOT for the rest of this fiscal year? I don't buy it. That commissioner, be fired in my administration.
Thank you.
I want to respond to that.
Yes, Peter, real quick.
Yeah, very quickly. I wouldn't support any gas tax. As a matter of fact, I'm the only one who is talking about lowering the gas tax. But let me give an example about the Department of Transportation. We spend approximately $100,000 a year in administrative cost per mile of road in our state. Nationwide, that is $11,000. See where the problem is spending, is that scope and reach of government that we were talking about. So I wouldn't support any tax increases.
Thank you. All right. Ken, I think you're next. We are up to Dave.
You guys have been barnstorming the state. I think you could probably make your own answers to, Tim could definitely do Peter, any answer, probably with full accent.
Let's not start that.
You guys have not talked about education, and Gary wants to kick off this, and Tom's going to add something to it along the way.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Let's talk a little bit about the achievement gap here in Connecticut. It's something that I am particularly concerned about in light of the fact that I am a university professor. Connecticut cities, I think we all know, maybe with the exception of Stamford, have become enclaves of failing school systems. This is in stark contrast to school systems in our suburban communities, such as New Canaan. The average SAT score in Connecticut is 1,031. It's not extremely high, but that's what it is. But in Bridgeport, the average score, SAT score, is 151 points below that. In Hartford, it's 147 points below. And let's just take Waterbury for a moment. The average SAT score there is 165 points below the norm in Connecticut. So my question to you is, as our state's next governor, What are you going to do to close the achievement gap in Connecticut? Because we are still losing generations of kids in our urban areas.
All right, Dave, go ahead.
Gary, thanks for another wonderful question. The promise of the American dream is what makes our country the greatest in human history. It's a promise that we make for every generation that our lives can and will be better than our parents, and that we'll do everything possible to make sure that our children's lives are better than ours. My father grew up in Elmira, New York, the son of a man who had to go to work after 8th grade, and he attended the public schools in Elmira. He was the first one in his family to go to college. On my mother's side, my grandfather grew up in Newark, New Jersey, the son of an immigrant who came here from Poland, was a wallpaper hanger, and he went to the public schools in Newark, and he was the first one in his family to go to college. Making sure that every child in every city, every town, has the opportunity to go to a good public school is an essential responsibility that we have. There are two ways that we're going to address that problem. The first is we're going to look to what was done in Massachusetts, which 20 years ago had a similar challenge to what we had. And what they did was they raised standards and accountability for everyone. And that's important because in communities like New Canaan as well, where our schools are good, they should be even better. And in closing the achievement gap, it should be closed for everyone. The second, though, is as a business person, as an entrepreneur, I understand the importance of choice, of markets, and of financial incentives. We have a broken funding model of 11 different funding formulas for our students. It funds charters at different levels than local schools, than magnets, than our career and technical schools. We're going to fix that. We're going to create a money follows the child, student-centered model. We're going to give every family a voice and a choice to choose the best school possible. We're going to have competition between all of our schools, and we're going to make sure that our school system, which used to be the calling card for our state, is the best in the country.
Thank you, Tim. And again, please, guys, we want to try and speed it up a little bit. Go ahead, Tim. Thank you.
Education is very important to me, Gary. I was proud to lead a community for 8 years that has a nationally ranked school system that immediately borders the city of Bridgeport. I'm the son of public educators, and my mom taught 23 years in the Bridgeport public school system. She's here tonight. Actually piloted one of the first full-day kindergarten programs in the state of Connecticut. And I remember the stories that she would share with me about the challenges of teaching in an urban school district, and recognizing that many of these kids have English as a second language, go home at night to parents that perhaps don't speak English, work in and live in very tough neighborhoods, in a tough environment in a city. And here's how you close the achievement gap. You don't close the achievement gap just by focusing on when school starts and when school ends. It takes a community effort. You close that achievement gap working around the clock with parents and teachers and school officials and community leaders working together to close that achievement gap. It's about investing in after-school programs to keep these kids off the street. It's to keep them engaged. It's to make sure that our urban teachers and educators have the resources that they require to make sure they're teaching in a safe environment. It's not just about money, but it's also about accountability. And it's about recognizing that to deal with this problem, it goes beyond a typical school day, and it takes everybody working together to close that gap. And it's about investing in magnet schools that are with an emphasis on math and science, which we've done, and we've seen the results of that. That's how we close the achievement gap. And when we do that, we lift all of our kids up. And we take a state known for its schools, and we guarantee, urban or suburban, we have one of the best school systems in the nation, and we can do that.
Thank you, Tim. Dave.
My wife is a teacher, and my mother-in-law taught for 41 years, God rest her soul. Connecticut is a land of disparity. Averages mean nothing with regard to income, with regard to educational attainment, because there's so much disparity. We have some of the wealthiest people in the country, some of the poorest people in the country. We have some of the best schools in the country, and some have the worst schools in the country. The most valuable asset this country has, the most valuable asset this state has, is its people. And our education system is broken. And I know it firsthand because I live in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We have to provide more choice. We have to provide more options. Not everybody is bound for college. Not every college degree is equal. We have tremendous needs with regard to the trades and technical areas. We ought to learn from other states and other countries, including Germany, where they end up taking a look at what people's aptitudes are, what their interests are, and they gear them accordingly so that they can end up being a productive citizen in society, to be able to support themselves, to support others with a good wage. And by the way, Germany is a heavy manufacturing country and not a low-wage country. We also have to change our education formula, funding formula that I talked to you about before. We need to re-engineer our education system. We also have to get rid of some dumb things like the minimum budget requirement, where when your school population's going down, you still have to spend the same amount of money. We need to focus on results. We don't want to tell teachers how to teach. Common Core is a problem. We have to say, this is what we expect you to achieve. We're going to give you flexibility to do it. As long as you do, fine. We're not going to bother you. And we've got to get rid of a lot of the overhead. We have well over 100 school districts with tremendous overhead, duplication of effort with regard to human capital systems, information technology systems, finance systems. We are wasting a huge amount of money. And we need to put that money to better use to educate our kids and give more opportunity.
Thank you, Dave. Doc, again, let's not take all of our time.
I'm so used to taking directions from Tom, because that's what I do when we are in the legislature all the time. He runs a tight ship there. Education. 3 things I would do to address the concerns that you raised. A, our education cost-sharing formula. It's broken. It's political. It is a block grant. That has to change, and we've got to have a better system by which we decide how much money we give to a child going to the school that he or she would like to go to. Second, I would create an educational savings account. Every family, and we've actually talked about this in this legislative session. I've gone in front of the committee and have done my, my presentation before them, testifying before the committee to say that families who are in underperforming schools, low-performing schools, should have the opportunity to take that money in the savings account and go to a school that they choose to go to, so that the system is fair, the system is equitable. And finally, we need to make sure that we encourage vocational schools right from schools itself. That's what we need. Every kid, if they choose to, of course, can go to a 4-year degree, but they don't have to. But there should be the pride that they can go to a vocational school and earn an extremely good income to put food on the table and clothes on the backs of their children. So these 3 steps will make sure that we look at the achievement gap that we have in our urban areas.
Thank you, Doc.
Respond to that very briefly.
Mike Handler, Mike Handler, and then we'll go left, right,
Okay, so this is the 5th and final debate before the convention, and I'm thrilled that we didn't spend 2 hours talking about casinos. We actually got a question, the first question in all of our debates on education, so thank you for that. We are in crisis right now, and unfortunately when you're in crisis, you can't do the good things we all know we want to do, like infrastructure and education. So first and foremost, we've got to fix our fiscal health. Let's talk about education for a second. Yes, we've got some of the best schools in this country and some of the worst schools in the country. We all know why we're failing in our cities. It's not necessarily about money. We're spending plenty of money per student and getting the same outcomes. What needs to change? And again, you can't tackle this when you're in crisis. But the truth is, we are putting way too much emphasis on the last 4 years of a student's education than we are in the first 4 years of a student's education. I can't think of anything that's more sad than sending a 5-year-old to kindergarten that's not prepared for kindergarten. It's not cheap. It's not easy to do. But we've got to find a way to fix in our cities the fact that our kids are going to school initially unprepared to learn. Let's talk about Stanford for a second, because we are doing some good things. But there's one thing we really should be doing. Every city has vacant retail. We've got a mall that's suffering. Every city's got a mall that's probably suffering. We've got a Burlington Coat Factory building in Stanford that I think is a remarkable choice. In the city of Stanford, I would love to see us take a need in one of our, fastest growing companies in Stanford, NBC Sports. They have trouble finding programming, technology help. They've constantly asked us, how can we help build a pipeline of technology help for programming? Why don't we take one of the vacant buildings in an anchor store in our mall, the Burlington Coat Factory. Let's take NBC Sports, who's willing to help. Let them go ahead and actually prepare the curriculum for an engineering program from UConn in the city of Stanford. Then take the UConn graduate students, work with our educators in Stanford Public Schools, and put all of our kids through a STEM program in the city of Stanford. In 5 years, you have a vertically integrated technology center where you're actually spinning out technology-driven students that can actually be prepared for jobs we have available in our city of Stanford. Every city in our state has opportunities like this. But unfortunately, unless we get tracked the first 4 years or 5 years of a student's life, those opportunities are lost. We also need to spend more time in our technical schools and our trade schools. You mentioned SAT scores, Gary. Not every student, unfortunately, is prepared to go on to college. And we're handing out diplomas in our inner city schools like it's an achievement when only 30% can graduate from college if they get there. We've got to spend more time finding kids that are willing and able to get prepared for jobs we have available right now.
Thank you, Mike. Mark?
You want me to run up here?
No, it's good.
I don't have to run up here, do I? Having had the opportunity to be a high school science teacher and basketball coach in the city of Bridgeport for 9 years gave me a clear understanding of what doesn't happen in education. And by the way, the education gap, the achievement gap has been around for a long time, unfortunately. It's not new. There are several things that have transpired over the last 20 years that have exacerbated the situation, in my opinion. Unless you're going to focus on the parent-student-teacher relationship in education, you're not going to get the kinds of outcomes that we expect. You know what? It happens in some places, in a lot of places in Connecticut. Unfortunately, in the other cities, it doesn't. And so, if you look at the amount of money that we spend on education, you have to say to yourself, where are we going wrong? You look at the structure of how money is allocated. The minimum expenditure per pupil across the state varies. We spend anywhere from $18,000, $19,000 per child in the city of Bridgeport and in New Haven and in Hartford and places like that. And then in the suburbs, maybe it's a little bit less. Maybe it's 15, 14, or 13. And the results are skewed. Unless we make the schools safer and the streets in the inner city safer, we're not going to get the kind of result that we're looking for. Because some kids are intimidated on the way to school. And it's a fact, especially in the inner cities. Because when the inner cities are run like the Wild West, it's a big distraction for kids. And it has an impact on them. And so, as I look at the history of how we've evolved to this point, I look at things like the State Board of Education and their infinite wisdom getting rid of the industrial art programs as to the effect that every kid was going to go to college. We don't create the mindset of kids at a younger age about establishing a trade. Plumbers, carpenters, electricians. It used to be that way in the high schools with the industrial arts programs. Those are all gone. If you look at the charter schools and the magnet schools in the inner cities with minority kids, look at the results that they're getting. The results will shock you if you're not familiar with it. They're as good as you'll find anywhere else. So is it about the money, or is it about the structure of how we're delivering educational services to our schools in different locations across the state of Connecticut? I urge you to take a look at it. We have declining enrollments across the state, and yet we have increasing education budgets everywhere. It's out of whack. Educators cannot be all things to all kids all day long. That never works. So something has got to change. So is it really money? or maybe it's about how we're delivering services or not delivering services.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor Boughton.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I taught high school for 14 years. I have a master's degree in educational psychology. So I understand a thing or two about how to deliver educational services and how to deliver them in a way in which it positively impacts our students. Mark mentioned that, you know, our districts are getting smaller across the state. The reality is in the city of Danbury, we're growing by about 1.5% each year. Each year we welcome 300 additional more students to our doors than we had the previous year. We're building schools and adding additions all over the city. In fact, we're adding a $60 million addition that you're paying for here, taxpayers of the state of Connecticut, at our high school, which is the largest high school in the state right now, but when we're done, we'll have 3,500 students under one roof. And right down the street, there's a very successful private high school that's half full that would take our students tomorrow. And I could save you $60 million right off the bat. So the fact of the matter is that we need to offer choice to our parents. We need to let them choose what direction they want their education to go for their children. Whether it be a parochial school, whether it be a charter school, and we're in the process of opening our first charter school in the city of Danbury, or whether it be the traditional public high school, the VOTEC school, we need to offer an a la carte menu to all of our parents to be able to choose what they want. Your parents have to be engaged, and you got to make them be engaged. I've been to the Amistad Academy from Achievement First in New Haven many times and toured there. The key core component for their success at that charter school is signing a contract between the parent and the school saying, you're going to have your kid ready for school every day at 8 a.m. at this building. It doesn't matter where you live in the city of New Haven, you have to have that done. We can do the same things here at the local level. It's not always about money, and it's certainly not always about offering more services. This notion that we now have to do birth to 3 or birth to 5, at some point there's absolutely nobody's ever held accountable and is certainly pushing off their responsibilities as parents on the rest of the public to be able to do their job. And I'll tell you something else. We've been innovative and creative. At our high school, we have something called the ECHO program. Our first cohort's graduating this year. They will graduate with a high school diploma and a 2-year degree from our local community college. So they'll be 2 years ahead of everybody else if they go to WestConn, UConn, or wherever they decide to go. First in the state, or second in the state to be able to do this along with Norwalk. And then finally, if we want to close the achievement gap, we've got to look at technology. We have to make high-speed internet access available to every child in this state, particularly at home. In our city, we have a proposal to be able to offer high-speed internet access to all homes in the city. $15 a month for 1 gigabyte up and 1 gigabyte down. And after 5 years, it becomes $5 a month. That's a wonderful thing that we're going to be able to do to help give kids access to the world of the internet and really the entire world around them. So there's a number of different ways that we can address this. We have to be creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial in our spirit, and we can close the achievement gap.
Thank you, Mayor. Peter.
Thank you. The question, I believe, was why is there a gap between the students in the cities and the suburban, if you will, including this town? I think
how we would address it.
Yeah, and we should go to the root of the problem. Who's been running those cities for the past 20, 30, 45, 50 years? Bridgeport, Democrats. Hartford, Democrats. New Haven, Democrats. They have been failing our kids by design. The Democrats and the teachers' union are not interested in seeing the city kids succeed. The Republicans should have the backbone to go to the cities and point out their failure and turn this around. And the way we do that, thank you. The way we do that, you introduce legislation, money follows the child. I'm happy that most of my colleagues over here are embracing that after I've been speaking about it for at least 8 months. What that means is that you give the kids, the parents, the choice of taking their kids from a failing school to a non-failing school within the district so that their kid can succeed. The amount of money that we spend per pupil, they should be able to take it from this school to the school that is succeeding. Does it mean competition? Yes. Can some public schools collapse and we're going to have to close them down? Yes. Competition is good. Parents should have the option of educating their kids to a non-failing school, including parochial or private schools. And we should give them that option. The other thing that we have to do, make it local. Teachers should be given the power to teach again. Instead of social engineering and paperwork that they have to do because of the mandates that come from Hartford and Washington, our teachers should teach our kids how to write and read and do math again. In our cities, we can do it, and we'll give you the power under. And if I'm the governor, if I get your trust to become your next governor, I'll give the teachers that power to do exactly what they were trained to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, very much. And Steve.
I'll start where I'll end in a second. It's a four-letter word, long-term. It's jobs. I'm a professor. I've been teaching for 8 years. I'm a product of the public schools of this state. And my saddest thing in driving around this RV is realizing that we are a state of gaps. We're a state of gaps. We have an achievement gap, which grows into a skills gap, which grows into an income gap. So we're just addressing one of the three gaps, and I'm going to focus on the achievement gap. So in business and being a CEO, we benchmark and we best practice. And David said something really interesting. I'm great he picked up on it, that Massachusetts has been kicking our butt in education for many years. And there's a professor down in Arkansas, Sandra Stotsky, who they brought up and reorganized how Massachusetts went about education. See, as a CEO, once again, I don't know all the answers, but I build teams, I bring experts together. And that's what we need to do. And what happened in the case of Massachusetts, and what I believe we have to do, is focus on three things. Yes, there's a funding issue. And funding has been inequitable for many years in this state. But we do have choice in this state. It's called moving. And those people who can move, and we have people who move out of the state for other choices, are able to move. But the injustice are people who can't afford to move and are stuck in systems for years and years upon years, stuck in a system that's not getting them out of this achievement gap. So funding is key. School choice and innovation on how we do that is key, number one. Second thing is standards. Not just kids' standards, it's teacher standards. We need to make sure that teachers are teaching what our kids need to be empowered with the technology and the skills they need to then close the skills gap. The third thing we need to talk about is outcomes, an outcome-based system where we have systems where there's a 70% graduation rate. That is unacceptable if we're ever going to close this achievement gap and eventually get to the skills gap. So that's how I'd address it. This is not an overnight solution or a problem that we're going to solve, but this is one that just consumes my mind because I see it every day, and we have the technology and the resource, and coming back to jobs, that I believe we need a bold, big, bold vision for Connecticut. And I think I have the biggest, boldest plan out there. A 5-step plan to create 300,000 jobs in Connecticut over the next 8 years. Because Dan Malloy has not been able to recover the 30,000 jobs that have been lost over the last 8 years. By doing that, and education is one of my 4 pillars, we can turn the state around and create 300,000 jobs in this state over the next 8 years, which gets to skills gap and economic gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Tim, next question. If I take a moderator's prerogative here, this is a question I'm going to give as a follow-up to what we just went through with the educational gap and funding. Greenwich sends $720 million to Hartford. Number 2, Stanford sends roughly $350 million to Hartford. And guess what? New Canaan is number 3, sends roughly $225 million to Hartford, and Darien sends around $200 million to Hartford. And all of those get less than a penny, well, except for Stanford. And I see Mayor Martin here. We may be breaking news. He may be changing affiliation, I believe. We're going to announce that. But in any event, that was a joke. That was a joke. In any event, in all seriousness, the one thing Kevin Moynihan, the first selectman of New Canaan, wants, I know Mayor Martin wants, I know Lynn Vanderslythe, and I know Jamie Stevenson want, less mandates from Hartford. Yes. So in 30 seconds or less, because we want to do 2 or 3 more questions, Tim, you're next. What are the unfunded mandates that you would address immediately out of the box? Please.
Am I going to get their question next or your question?
That's this question. No, you're getting me now.
Okay, so what unfunded mandates
would you, if you were governor, every single municipal leader wants less unfunded mandates. Right. Basically, you're telling,
I've been there.
You've been there. So how would you address it as governor, the unfunded mandates? What would be the ones you would attack first?
The governor needs to take this philosophy with unfunded mandates before you get into specific ones that you're going to eliminate. If you're not going to fund them, you must eliminate them. It's that simple. Fund them or eliminate them. That would be my governing philosophy. And I would insist that the legislature work with the governor's office to develop a priority list of those unfunded mandates, working with mayors and first selectmen, that cost the most in delivering municipal services. Because what happens? You're not going to get aid from the state to fund those unfunded mandates. You're going to have to raise your property taxes. And everybody in Fairfield County knows we have a property tax problem here in the state of Connecticut. So I would be governed by the philosophy you either fund them or eliminate them, and I would insist that the legislature work with the governor and local municipal officials in developing that priority list to determine what would receive highest levels of priority to either reform or repeal.
Thank you, Tim. Quick, Dave.
As I mentioned before, we must deregulate with regard to the private sector, and we must reduce unfunded mandates with regard to the public sector. We are overboard in the case of both. One example that I gave you before is the minimum budget requirement with regard to education. There are many, many more. And that's something that the governor does have the authority to take a look at and should take a look at as a high priority basis when they take office.
Thank you very much, Steve. Quickly.
Every year from the state legislature, we send to our towns, we send to our municipalities what needs to be added in their curriculum. I would let the municipalities, I would let the school system decide what needs to be taught to their children, and we do not need that mandate aid coming from Hartford, especially when you know it's an unfunded mandate. No more unfunded mandates coming from Hartford to any town, to any city.
Thank you, Dr. Mike.
So in my experience in Stamford, we've got a unique one. We've got this municipal stormwater maintenance program. We're one of the few cities, the only city in the state, where we spend millions of dollars a year to identify outfalls, and there's no one at the state to even review our paperwork. We actually do all this work, costs us millions of dollars, buying new equipment, and we're the only city in the state that's required to do it, and it's unfunded by the state. But there's a bigger issue here. Tom, your question talks about all the money that our towns are sending up to Hartford. I want to take a minute to address our failing cities for a second. Our state has gotten into the habit of rewarding bad behavior and punishing good behavior. We are not going to be a successful state without healthy, vibrant cities. In the city of Stamford, I worked on 5 major priorities in the last 6 years under both the Republican administration and a Democratic administration. Those 5 things turn the city around towards its fiscal long-term health. If our cities, which are draining our towns of all their tax dollars, do not take into account the 5 things we did in the city of Stamford 6 years ago, our cities are free to raise their mill rate in Hartford from 74 to 150 until they put a mayor in office in those cities that will actually address the long-term fiscal health of the problem. There's no question about it. Hartford is not solving its problems locally. They're taking money from all of our towns, driving it up there, and rewarding bad behavior. As governor, I will reward good behavior, and I will punish bad behavior.
Thank you, Mike. Mark?
Tim, I wouldn't give Hartford the choice of saying fund it or get rid of it. Because if you allow them to fund it, they're going to raise the taxes again. Because that's what they do. So I think I mentioned in my opening speech about being able to provide relief to municipalities by eliminating unfunded mandates. There are currently 1,200 unfunded mandates identified by mayors and first selectmen across the state that are costly. Some of these mandates have been on the books as much as 30 years and have outlived their useful life. And they do nothing but cost people money. The most stringent ones are the ones in education. And that's the most costly line item for every municipality in the state is their educational budget. So if relief was provided in the way of mandates, and you can pick any ones you want, from binding arbitration to in-school suspension to burden of proof, it goes on and on and on. That would provide a big relief financially to many strapped municipalities across the state. It all falls back to the factor of making Connecticut affordable. When you're affordable, you will be able to solve your problems because you will grow your base. You will incorporate more taxpayers into the equation and generate more revenues. That's how it works. That's how successful communities work. So this issue of mandates is a big issue and something that the governor, with the help of the legislature, because you can't do it yourself, has to get together and solve it.
Thank you, Mark.
When we win the State House of Representatives, those 5 seats, and when we win the State Senate, that 1 seat, we're not going to have to worry about unfunded mandates anymore. But in the short term, we should require a 2/3 vote by each house to even look or discuss about a mandate on a city or town. I'm going to give you 2 because it'll make your hair fall out. One of them is mentioned, the MS4 requirement costs us this year about $800,000 in our budget. Completely useless, not going to do a thing for the environment, but something that DEEP demanded. The second one is a phosphorus removal requirement that we have on our wastewater treatment plant. Will cost our taxpayers $110 million to do a very simple thing, remove roughly about this much of phosphorus from the output of our wastewater treatment plant. It is absurd, it is wrong, and it is a breathtaking waste of taxpayer money.
Thank you, Mayor. Peter.
Yeah. Within the first 100 days of my administration, I would make sure that I would either meet with every mayor and first selectman in our state and make sure that we understand which ones are the most burdensome mandates that they are getting from Hartford, and start with those. But binding arbitration and prevailing wage are the ones that I will look into them right away.
Thank you very much. That was the quickest answer tonight. Well done. Steve.
Yeah, as a CEO of high-tech companies, what you start with is you start asking your customers what brings them relief. So I think a lot of work has been done with mayors to create from those 1,200 unfunded mandates, which ones go away, and then you work with the legislature to remove burdens from people. That's what works in business, and that can work in Hartford. And I could give you the top 10 or the top 40. I'll give you a lateral example real quick. In towns like New Canaan, because this is the duplicity of Hartford, storm drains. The state roads, they don't have to upgrade their storm drains, but Kevin Moynihan and New Canaan required to upgrade your storm drains. So if it's good enough for Hartford, it should be good enough for the towns. We need to do things like address prevailing wage rates so you can build buildings at an affordable cost. Minimum budget requirement drives up the cost of living and drives up property taxes. That's what we need to address to make it affordable to live here in Connecticut.
Thank you. Dave, real quick.
Question of asking to identify 1, 2, or 3 items minimizes the severity of this problem. The unfunded mandates, the burdensome regulations are undermining our competitive advantage. Our state was able to attract families and businesses here from a combination of our location, the high quality of schools, and our low cost, our low taxes and our low costs. We're going to be putting forward a major proposal on our website next week on taxes and regulations. The process that we're going to put in place from day one of how we're going to address this, that we're going to bring in our first selectmen, our mayors, we're going to bring in our legislators, we're going to bring in businesses, and we're going to go after this. And the model for us is going to be Utah. Utah saw the incredibly burdensome regulation in California, and they said, let's go after this as a state. They were so successful that Utah is now known as Silicon Slopes. We have a tremendous opportunity in taking business in our region from New York, from New Jersey, from New England, from those that don't do this well. We're going to put in place the best regulatory structure in our state, and we're going to bring business back here.
Thank you very much. And the last question, before we do closing remarks, Ken Dixon, and please, you don't have to use up all your time, but we all have about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, the faster the better.
And that question is directed to
David.
Walker.
David, what accomplishment as a Republican are you most proud of?
Connecticut is a tax and spend state. It taxes too much, it regulates too much, it mandates too much, it spends too much, it borrows too much, it invests too little. I'm the only candidate on this stage, on the Democratic stage, or the independent, who has a proven track record of making government smaller, reducing headcount, reducing number of offices, reducing organizational units. leveraging technology, engaging into public-private partnerships, improving productivity 90%, improving return on investment to the taxpayers, and saving the American people during the 10 years when I was Comptroller General of the United States, which in English is Auditor General, Chief Performance and Accountability Officer for the United States, $380 billion. It's easy to talk about the problems. It's easy to pontificate about the potential solutions. The difference is who's got a proven track record, who's reduced taxes, not increased taxes, who's reduced the size of government, who's significantly reduced the unfunded retirement obligations. Please do your homework, because the facts do not always match the words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Prasad?
Every town, every city, unfortunately in our state and perhaps in the nation, has one common problem: the opioid crisis. And I'm extremely happy to inform you and let you know that in this legislative session and in the sessions I have been in the last 8 years, proud to have served as a legislator from Glastonbury, we have introduced important steps, first steps, but steps to make sure we curb the opioid crisis. A, education. There are alternatives to opioids. You and I, all of us, need to know that when you go to your healthcare professional. Two, you need to make sure that the prescriptions are monitored, so there is no doctor shopping, and between the doctor, between the healthcare professional, and of course the pharmacy, our prescriptions, including mine, are all monitored. We've made sure that the opioids are stored safely, disposed safely. You know, you have that, I'm sure your police stations in your town have such facilities. And of course, making the emergency treatment of Narcan available. So for me, the scarce that our nation, our state, our town, and our municipalities are faced with, addressing that, A, and continuing to address that is one thing that I know I have done that, and I will continue to fight that fight as long as we all can. And this curse is resolved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prasad? Mike?
So the Republican value that I'm most proud of, also...
I think it was Republican accomplishment.
Yeah.
Ken?
Sure. So the Republican accomplishment that I'm most proud of happens to be the one that is most important to all of you, and that is being fiscally conservative. I've spent the last 6 years in the city of Stamford, again, working for both a Republican and a Democrat, working to make our long-term liabilities smaller, more affordable, so that we've got long-term prosperity in our city. The things that I've accomplished were renegotiating labor contracts, moving to 401ks or defined contribution plans, improving the costs of our health care in our city, bringing the city to fully fund its both pension obligations and its retiree health care obligations, privatizing a nursing home, saving over $5.5 million a year, and ensuring that nursing home stays alive for the rest of eternity to take care of our needed residents in the city of Stamford that are on Medicaid. Working to fix our wastewater treatment plant, making it more efficient and more affordable. These are the things that make Stamford a growing city, where our unemployment rate's been cut in half in the last 6 years, where our median household income has grown 16% in the last 6 years. These are the accomplishments that my Republican values drive me to fiscal responsibility, because that's what matters the most to all of us. We're in crisis right now, and you can't do great things when you're in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mark?
I think the thing that I'm most proud of as being mayor for 27 years is that I've been able to change the face of a city that reinvented itself from an old industrial blue-collar past to one that now is a corporate hub and employment center in the state of Connecticut. And it was all done by making it affordable. If you haven't noticed, I've said that word a dozen times tonight. because that, to me, is what it's all about for Connecticut to prosper again. We've got to be more competitive with our competitors, and we do it through affordability of growing our base. You know, when you don't raise taxes for 10 years in a row, tell me who's the most competitive. Tell me, why are we growing? How did it happen? No tax increase for 10 years in the city of Shelton has allowed this to happen.
Thank you very much. Mark?
I think one of the best accomplishments I had as a Republican was creating a program called Clean Start in our city. We took some of the most disadvantaged people in Danbury, people who didn't have jobs, who were homeless, and we gave them an opportunity each day to work for the city, providing a valuable public service. At the end of the day, they got a $35 gift card to go and spend wherever they want. They received volunteer wraparound services. We got people into treatment. We got them off the streets. And eventually, some of those people ended up into single-room occupancy homes. And finally, some of those people have interviewed for jobs with the city of Danbury. That's a Republican principle, giving people a hand up instead of a handout.
Thank you very much. Peter.
I don't think that's a fair question to all of us, because some of my colleagues over here have been Republicans for a very short period of time. But look, I don't look at achievement as a Republican or a Democrat. I look at the achievement as an American. Whether you are Democrat, Republican, independent, unaffiliated, the biggest achievement that you can have in your life, it's not to be dependent on the government. The moment you become dependent on the government has command and control over you, and it guarantees failure for you and I. So I'll start with my first achievement. When I came to the United States, I told you I didn't speak a word of English. I made it my job to learn English, to embrace the Judeo-Christian values of this country, go to college, and become an American. After that, I decided to pursue another dream. Decided to go to law school, become an attorney. I did that without any government assistance. I always maintained that independence from the government, because the government was what forced me to search for freedom and escape communism. Ladies and gentlemen, socialism is here. It is in your state and my state. Your government, it's all about command and control. And we were just talking about the cities. What fell the cities? It is the government. It is by design that the Democrats and the liberals, they want to have that command and control over you and I. They want to create that voting bloc to get elected and re-elected. So that dream that I pursued, and I continue to pursue, I want to make sure that every kid in our state, whether they live in Fairfield where I live, or Bridgeport, which is a couple of miles north of where I live, they should be able to achieve that, and the government should not prevent them from achieving that dream. That is the American dream, as to whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. So I'm very proud of it that I have been given the opportunity to come to the United States and pursue the American dream and be in front of you tonight to be interviewed for the most powerful position in this country, in this state at least. So I appreciate you being here tonight. Hey, I wasn't born here, but I can find a birth certificate. Trust me, I'll run for that too. Come on, guys, come on, that's a joke. All right, that's a joke before the media reports that as some, birther or something, but, don't do that. It's a joke. But the truth is that at one point, I'll share a joke with you. The truth is that at one point, I did get a telephone call from President Obama, the former president, and I was speaking at a rally somewhere with regard to illegal immigration. And he said, Mr. Lumaj, don't be too harsh on those people, because you and I know what it means not to be born in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a joke. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. All right, so our next act, Steve.
How do you follow that up? I think Peter started right, though, because greatest accomplishments aren't Republican or Democratic, they're American. And the personal accomplishment of my life is my relationship with my wife and my 2 teenage daughters. My professional accomplishment I'm most proud of is a difficult one. I served in the military for 11 years in a submarine force, and it's kind of a sad one. When you have to deliver the body of a son to a mother and fold the American flag and deliver to her a flag and issue the words I never want to issue again, on behalf of the President of the United States, the United States Navy, and this nation, please accept this flag as a sign of your son's dedication and service. And that's the seriousness which I will take to being your governor, because this is going to be about character. This race will be about character of who can win a race in November and who will do the right things when you're alone in a room, and who do you want to be there making decisions when no one is watching. That's how I was trained in the military, what I've done in business, and that's what I want to take to the office of governor for the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. David?
Steve, as a citizen of this country, thank you for your service. The values of the Republican Party, from its founding of Abraham Lincoln through Theodore Roosevelt through Ronald Reagan, we have always been the party of opportunity. My grandfather, the one that I spoke about, who grew up in Newark, New Jersey, had us read the words from the base of the Statue of Liberty each year as a family. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, reminding us that we lived in the greatest country of all time. I haven't been in government all my life. What I've been doing is creating opportunity in the business world. And I'm proud of the jobs that I've created and the opportunities that I've created. And one of those opportunities was from a person whose parents immigrated to this country. He worked with me, and I was able to help him start a new business that's going to employ more people. That's the kind of opportunity that we need in this state. As a governor, I'm going to bring that kind of optimistic, can-do, entrepreneurial approach so that everyone in this state has that kind of opportunity.
Thank you. And last but not least,
my proudest accomplishment as a Republican is my proudest accomplishment as a leader in public service, demonstrating a consistency and a constancy of leading by example and challenging the status quo. I've done that at every walk of every level of government that I've served in and what I'm pursuing now. When I was elected first selectman of Trumbull and I inherited a pension fund funded at only 27%, I said we're going to lead by example. I am not going to accept a pension from the town because I am not going to ask people to do things that I am not prepared to do myself. Leaders lead by example. And if ever there was a time to challenge the status quo, it's now. And over the course of the last 14 months of this campaign, whether it be challenging the practice of padding pensions with mileage reimbursement, or calling out health care that's better than what members of Congress receive, or standing up against this governor's judicial activism in trying to put his best friend in charge of the Supreme Court, or standing up and saying that the city of Hartford should not receive a $550 million bailout, or standing up time and again in taking on the practices of the last 8 years and vowing to do that in this campaign. I am proud of how we have challenged the status quo and led by example.
Thank you very much, Tim. So we've come to the end of the question and answer. Now we're going to do closing remarks, starting with Prasad. 90 seconds each. Please hold your applause to the end. Thank you very much. Doc.
Our common goal for each and every one here in this room and in our state is to revive Connecticut and make it prosperous again. And for that to happen, we have to go past May, go past August, and think of November. We need to win in November, and that win for November is not just one of us. It has got to be the whole team, the House, the Senate, and the constitutional officers together. Together, we will make that difference. We need a candidate at the top of the ticket who has a record, a constant record of winning every election that he has stood for. That is me. You need, at the top of the ticket, a candidate who can motivate new voters into our base. And just to share you some statistics, there are 50,000 Indian Americans in our state who in the past elections have been on the sidelines. And now, for obvious reasons, They are motivated. They are energized. They're going to come into our party and make the difference in winning that election for us in November. We've got the entire cities we've got to be careful about, and I have developed deep-rooted trust in my practice in Hartford, in Meriden. They will make the difference.
Thank
so
you, Doc.
we need a candidate who will bring victory to our party, to revive our state. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank the moderators. I want to thank my wife, my partner for life, for being here as well. This is the most important election in the history of the state of Connecticut. We're either going to recognize reality, elect a governor who has the courage, the commitment, the communication skills, and the proven track record to do what needs to be done, along with constitutional officers that will support the governor, along with a Senate and a House that will support the governor to make the tough choices to create a better future. I'm not running for me. I'm running for you. So all of us can stay here as long as we want, so our kids can get a job, good job here, so we can live close to our grandkids, so our home values start going up rather than down, and so we can retire here without being taxed out of our homes. There's two questions you have to ask. Who can win, and who can get the job done when you do win? I can win because I have what the people want. They don't want a traditional politician, and they want somebody to put the state's finances in order. I've already talked to you about my track record on that. Secondly, they want to make sure that you've got somebody who can lead a team to help create a better future. The decision is in your hands. If you make the right decision, hope is on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Tim?
These last 14 months have taken me to every corner of this state. And everywhere I've gone, the message has been consistent and clear. Will tomorrow be better than today? Will we be able to look back on this moment and this time 30 years from now and say we as a people rose up and did what needed to be done to save our state? You have an important decision to make. And as we approach a convention and a primary and a general election, but more importantly the primary, when you're selecting your nominee, your decision comes down to one word, and that word is trust. Who can you as Republicans trust to not only prosecute the campaign and win in November, but trust to have the spine of steel to do what needs to be done to fix the state of Connecticut? I did not find my value system in a poll or a focus group. With me, what you see is what you get. And if ever there was a time to send proven reformers and Hartford outsiders to the Gold Dome to completely dismantle and upend a pervasive culture of entitlement that has compromised the future of our state and future generations, the time is now. I am prepared to go to Hartford, determined without fear or favor to do what is right on behalf of all the people of the state of Connecticut. And here's how committed I am. I am prepared to be a one-term governor who doesn't get reelected if it means saving our state. Because this election is not about the next election, it's about the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Dave?
As I travel around the state, I see a lot of depressed faces. I see a lot of depressed faces because they've seen family members leave, and they don't see what the future is for their children. What they're looking for is someone who can provide solutions. It reminds me growing up of Jimmy Carter, who addressed us from the Oval Office in a beige cardigan and said, we need to learn to accept something less. Well, Ronald Reagan wore a crisp suit, and he said, it can be morning in America again. We can cut taxes. We can slash regulations. We can grow. We can win the Cold War. That's the kind of thinking that we need to bring to our state. The ideas that we have are to solve our retirement liability problems. They are to bring in billions of dollars of private capital to rebuild our trains, our roads, and our airports. It's to make our schools the best in the country, and is to make our taxes and regulations the lowest in this part of the country. And that combination is going to make our state what it once was, the best place in the country to live, work, and raise a family. Join me. Let's go make it happen.
Thank you, Dave, very much. Steve.
Leaders set tone. Tone creates culture. Culture is our destiny. You know, I want this job more than I want the title, to be honest, because we have the resources here to turn around. We have, as I said, 42 colleges in the state. 1/3 of the U.S. economy is within 400 miles of us. 40 million consumers live within a 200-mile radius. We live along the I-95, 91, 84 corridor with access to major airports and seaports across the state. Is it perfect? No. Can it be better? Yes. But it takes tone and culture change to make this happen. And I want this job so much that, see, I'm not a politician, okay? And this is what I want to say to you all. This is the last public office I will ever run for, because we need someone who will run into the fire, independent of personal interest or self-interest, who wants to accomplish the mission. And you know what? Yes, it may take 1 term or 2 term. Whenever I'm done, I'm done. And then I get to go back home to my wife, Suzanne, and my kids, because I'm not a career politician. I will not be beholden to anyone for any job. And it will take that focus to solve the job, not looking for another job. I do not want to be your failed U.S. senator or your failed U.S. congressman. It's time to run in this building, put out the fire, and I go back home to take care of something else in my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Peter.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for supporting us and for remaining involved. Let me make you a promise tonight. If you make a decision that I may disagree with it and I do not get the 15% or win the primary, I will respect it, I will honor it, and the following day, I will be working as hard as I'm working for myself for the one that you nominate. The Republican Party must win in 2018. It is ours to lose. And in order for us to win it, I hope you're going to get it right and nominate someone with the character and the fortitude and the backbone, an outsider who can go to Hartford and dismantle that mentality. That outsider is me. Ladies and gentlemen, look at the electability of someone who's going to be your next nominee. I'm the only one who's electable. 2014, I got approximately 500,000 votes. From 2014 to present, I never stopped campaigning. Remained involved, and I will remain involved because I love this state and I love the Republican Party. I have more networking in the cities than anyone else. I had my 50th birthday party in Waterbury. 700 people showed up for that party, all Democrats, and donated over $70,000 in one night. The Eastern Europeans are the fastest growing bloc in our state, and they will vote Republican for the first time in 2018, approximately 50,000 of them. I will recruit them for the Republican Party, not for me. Please get it right this time because we do have an opportunity. I ran out of time, but I'll keep on talking.
Thank you. Thank you. Connecticut come back together. Now, I'd like to say it's all about me.com, but it's really not. It's all about all of us in this room. It's about the candidates that are behind us. It's about you, the activists that are out there. By working together as a team, we can do what we did in Danbury. We can win election after election after election. We can take the House. We can take the Senate by all of us pulling together. This past November, I won re-election by 65% of the vote, and I'm very proud of that. But thank you. That's my one fan. But I'm really proud. Just kidding. We love you. I'm really proud of the fact that I've been able to take in a supermajority of city council people, zoning members, and Board of Education. We run together as a team. And that's what we need to do in the fall. Now look, all of us out here have big, bold plans. And we're going to need to be big, we're going to need to be bold, we're going to be brave in our ideas. My idea is very simple. Phase out the state income tax over the next 10 years. Give us that special something that we had in 1991 that brought people to Connecticut, that convinced people to stay in Connecticut, convinced businesses to be here. That's what we need. We need that marketing tool that 9 other states across the country have. I've been blessed and honored to serve in the military and wear the uniform of the United States of America. We live in the greatest nation on earth. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you very much. Mark?
There's a reason I was elected 14 times over a couple different generations. And the reason is because people trust me with their money and they trust my judgment. There's a real lack of leadership in Hartford. It's very evident from a financial aspect and from a transportation aspect. You know, we talked about that in length today. When you spend $562 million on a busway in the Hartford area, and yet you neglect Fairfield County, which is the economic engine of the state of Connecticut, it shows a lack of leadership. But there's one other subject matter out there that no one's talking about, and if you're not aware of it, I want to make you aware of it. It's called crumbling foundations. It's when the concrete foundation under your house starts to disintegrate and the house collapses. Well, we have that problem in Connecticut if you're not aware of it. It's in the eastern part of our state, and it affects approximately 34,000 homes. Do you realize the kind of economic impact that it will have to the region and the state, and we'll all bear the cost for it? And how about the devastation to the homeowners that they've worked all their life to accumulate their property, and yet it's gone. It's comes worthless because the house is collapsed. So leadership will solve these types of things in Connecticut. And that's what we need in Hartford, a leader who will lead, a leader who will stand up and tell people like it is. I've done that consistently for over a quarter of a century. That's why I got results.
Thank you very much, Mark. Last but not least, Mike.
So I've been incredibly blessed throughout my entire life, and I've worked really hard as well. I've been blessed in my personal life, my professional life, and my volunteer career. And there's really been no greater honor than being able to run for governor to represent all of you in Hartford. I'm sure beside everyone here on stage, we all have behind us a family that's made this possible. Traveling for some 14 months, in my case 9 months throughout the state, I can tell you, leaving your responsibilities at home, if I didn't have my wife Sarah, there's no way I could have been able to do it. And we've got 4 daughters. I'm incredibly grateful for all of their support throughout this entire process. And I think behind all of us, we owe all of our families a round of applause. I mentioned to you it's a little different for me. It's not academic. It's not theoretical. I fixed the same problems in the city of Stamford that our state faces today. It's brought the ire of the governor and the state Democratic Party, which tells you they're worried that I'm electable. Most importantly, I never told you who I was. My name is Mike Handler, and I look forward to serving you as your next governor. Thank you, New Canaan. Have a good night.
Republican candidates
took the stage tonight. There were more than 500 people there.
But it's clear that there's plenty of interest in this year's governor's race, as evidenced by the thousands of you who tuned in.
Huge crowd here. This is a clear sign that the Connecticut Republican Party is here to fight, and we're here to win. We're going to be victorious in 2018.
In order to change what's happening in Connecticut, we have to change who we send to Hartford.